What I'm trying to do is bring awareness as to what happened, this clash of cultures, and could that have been averted? Probably not. That's the way I feel, especially with the way the English thought. The English were out here to conquer and just feed the motherland with goods, and a lot of all this has to do with religion as well. Many of the Native Americans in this area did not conform to their Christianity, to the attempts of Christianizing them. Some Native Americans did, some didn't. They were called praying Indians, the ones that did. But what it does is, it makes, when you don't become, or you don't adapt to this English culture, it makes it easier for you to be discarded, and makes it easier for you to be killed. And basically, that's what the English did to the Native Americans. They practiced a form of genocide on them. And that's basically it. That's all they did. They had this in mind. Up until 1661, 1662, when Massasoit was still alive, between Plymouth and the Native Americans around here, we had the Pecasets and the Pokanockets. Things were going pretty well. They went great, but it wasn't open hostilities. Things really started to turn bad when the Puritans came in 1630. Puritans came in with 1,000 people, 16 ships. Plymouth regarded the Native Americans as, and with William Bradford was their governor, as somewhat friendly and helpful. Obviously, if it wasn't for the Native Americans, the Pilgrims all would have died that first winter. So without them, and Bradford had that in his mind when he always talked and made treaties with them, that at any given point, the Wampanoags and Massasoit could have wiped them out. So they kind of got along with them, but still there was this tension of they didn't trust one another to a certain point. The Wampanoags entered into a defense alliance with the Pilgrims, because the Pilgrims had guns, and besides that, they were at war with the Narragansetts, and that was a constant kind of conflict. But when the native people got their hands on weapons, of modern weapons, let's say, what they were at the time, they were more proficient in the weaponry of the day than the colonists were. They lived in the woods. They lived, they hunted, they fished. They used bow and arrows at first for thousands of years, and then when the flintlock came along, they just adapted that procedure that they used with their bows and arrows and changed it over to the flintlocks. The colonists back then, the English army or whatever they were, militia, they fired in volleys. They did not fire at specific targets. The Native Americans being used to hunters, they were hunters. They could pick out a colonist and take them out with one of their flintlocks or with a bow and arrow. But things, like I said, started really going bad when the Puritans showed up. These people were driven to succeed. That's where we get the Protestant work ethic from. If you die with more material goods, they felt you'll get a better place in heaven because you led a productive life. And that still carries over to capitalism today. And what happened was, in 1637, the Pequot War broke out. Pequot War was the Puritans wanted the monopoly on the fur trade. These are beaver skins. This is what they wanted. The Pequots controlled it. The Connecticut River Valley tribes along the coast and the river tribes did not like the Pequots because they were forced to pay tribute to them. So they kind of sided with the English when it came time to, the English kind of protracted a war of suspicious means or suspicious values, but they went to war against the Pequots, and they destroyed the Pequots. They destroyed them so badly that they were forbidden to, you can pass this around, They were forbidden their language. Everything was destroyed. There were two Pequot chiefs, Sassacus and Uncas. Uncas wanted to side with the English. Sassacus wanted to side with the Dutch for the fur trade. Uncas split, went to, well, now it's Uncasville. That's where we have the two major casinos. You have Foxwoods, the Pequots, and you have the Mohegan Sun. So they're still at odds with one another, you know, but that was something that happened between them. That was an internal problem that these people had. Along come the English, they want it. So they enlist the aids of the Narragansetts, who was also an enemy of the Pequots, and with their aid and with the aid of the river tribes in Connecticut, they demolished the Pequots, broke them up, sold the survivors into slavery. The Pequot village was burned to the ground by the English, and it's astounded the Narragansetts that these people, these English, would kill women and children in such a horrific fashion. The English explained it that it was God's will. Everything comes back to these people with religion. They use God as a weapon, or as justification for carrying out wars and atrocities against people. So after the war, after 1637, now more and more people, more and more English are coming into this country, and they're settling in Plymouth, and they're settling in Boston, and they're pushing out, and they're pushing the Native Americans to the brink of. They're not getting any justification in land courts. Every time a Native American would bring an Englishman to court, he always lost. The deck was stacked against him. So that started the ball rolling with the animosity towards the English, and it was not unfounded. The Native Americans also complained about the English, their domestic animals ruining their corn crops. Brayton Point was a giant cornfield out there. Verrazano, when he came up in the 1500s, thought that side of the west side of the Taunton River looked like a park. The Native Americans had slashed and burned and the forest and created quite a extensive cornfields as far as into East Providence. Let's put it that way. Verrazano saw these people as more healthy, more energetic, and just all around better looking than Europeans were at this particular time. So when you say that they were, the English try to say that these Native Americans were inferior to them, a lot of the early explorers felt that they were superior to the English. So getting back to the things that were really angry, that the Native Americans were angry about, the English did not. They were all free roaming. Their pigs, their chickens, their cows, and they would do a job on the Native American cornfields. Now you have to imagine these people live in a seasonal cycle. If you don't have enough corn to eat during the winter, you're going to starve. And this is what they were complaining about. And I had several gardens on my property, and my goat got loose and ate just about everything. And it's amazing what these animals can eat. Chickens, my chickens were free ranging, and all the seedlings, they ripped them all up. They ate all the cabbage, all the lettuce, all the broccoli. So I can understand. I mean, this is like on a minute scale, but I could see where you get very, very angry with these guys. And when they went to court, the English court said to them, "Well, you've got to fence in." The Native Americans wanted the English to fence in their animals, and they said, "No, you fence in your cornfields." How can you fence in a cornfield that's huge, that goes on? And it just was. So they lost in that, and they just kept losing. Every time the younger Native Americans kept seeing their inheritance going away because the towns kept getting bigger, the land kept getting sold to the English to a point where, and then the English wanted to control the Native Americans even more by forcing them to become English subjects. They felt that, the Native Americans felt that they're their own separate entity. They don't want to be English. They don't want to follow English law. They don't want to follow the King of England. So this creates an animosity on the English side. And it keeps going and going and going until finally in 1664, Anawan, who was the son of Massasoit died in 1662, Anawan is summoned to Plymouth for, they want a treaty. They want to make sure that the Native Americans are not conspiring to revolt. So he goes to Plymouth under some duress, and they question him, and they let him go, and on his way back to Bristol, where the headquarters were, the main capital of the Pocahontas were, he died. And this is how Phillip, or Metacomp, comes into play. Metacomp was the second son of Massasoit. Massasoit had another son and another daughter, I believe. I can't think of the younger son's name, but he got killed over here in fighting a rear guard action in the Tiverton line. So Metacomp is summoned several times to Plymouth because now they want to proceed to control and collect the Native Americans' weapons. This is a flintlock musket, all right, smooth bore, 20 gauge, and it's very lightweight. It's a 62 caliber, all right. These are the weapons that the Native Americans were using. They were better than the ones that the English used, and they wanted them. The English wanted these weapons. The Native Americans, they had passed laws that you cannot sell a weapon, you cannot sell a musket to, the English did, you cannot sell a weapon to the Native Americans. You cannot sell lead to make bullets. You cannot sell any kind of parts. You cannot sell gunpowder. So Phillip went along and said, I don't think so. And it kind of went, yeah, okay, we'll agree to, but he didn't go to Plymouth, he went to Taunton. Because he didn't trust him at Plymouth. He thought that he would get arrested and executed, which he probably would have. So him and his entourage went to Taunton, signed this treaty, and then said that, well, we'll go along with this for a little bit. And eventually the English kind of forgot about it. And the Native Americans started buying their weapons from the Dutch and the French. And they would trade for beavers, and the fur trade was still going somewhat strong back then. And what would happen is, now the Bay Colony, Massachusetts Bay Colony, wants to parlay with them and see what their plans are. Every time there was a meeting amongst the Native Americans, the English thought that it was a war council, that they were going to be attacked anytime. So Phillip, or Metacomp, went to Boston, dressed in his finery with his wampum belts, and that's where he got the name King Philip. Massasoit had given him the name Philip, and his brother Alexander gave two English names, but they're not really English names, they're Greek names. So the English kind of screwed him on that too. Of course, Massasoit didn't know that, but that's the names, the Christian names that they gave him. So anyway, they go to Boston, and he comes into Boston, into the town of Boston, with his entourage and all his finery, and they kind of mocked him, and they called him King Philip. And the name kind of stuck to him. So as this keeps going on, he goes there, and he felt that those English actually treated him a little bit better, but they still did not trust one another. And then, this is 1674, and in 1674, Philip decides that it's time to unite all the tribes and start a revolution. But it's going to take time and it's going to take effort. He went to Connecticut and Canachet and the Narragansett chief, and Canachet agreed with them. They developed a plan to unite the tribes. As time went on, you have to remember that a lot of these tribes did not like one another. Even though they spoke the same language, and they were ancient quarrels before the white man came amongst these tribes. So it's not like a Garden of Eden that all these people agreed with one another. We're all human. They were human beings, and they had their ups and downs with each other. So as Phillip is on his way through, I believe it was in Niantic country, which is in the western part, or in the central west part of, it's on your maps. They were Nipmunks and Niantics, I believe, were down south, but the Nipmunks. Several of his younger braves, they kind of know of the plans, but they're too anxious. They want to start. They don't understand that what it's going to take to drive these guys, to drive the English out. So they harassed some Swansea settlers, broke into houses on Sunday morning on June 24th, 1675, as the settlers were at church, set fire to one, stole some goods, and one of the settlers shot at one of the Native Americans, and the Native Americans later died. And of course, Metacomp is not there to kind of assuage things and try to make things easier again. Now all of a sudden, it's hit the fan, let's put it that way. The English start, they go to their blockhouse, the people in Swansea. There are two blockhouses. One was the Niles Garrison, it was called, Garrison House it's called, and the Bourne Garrison House. The Niles Garrison House, they think, was at where 103 and the old Gardener's Neck Road meet. It's behind the Swansea Volunteer Fire Station. I don't know if everybody knows what that is. There's a cemetery behind there. They feel that is where that Garrison House was. And the other Garrison House was further down. Do you know where the Mason Barney shipyard is? On the other side of Tawisset there. In fact, there is a plaque there, I believe, that says it was the Bourne Garrison, right next to the Mason Barney shipyard.
That's correct.
And that Garrison House was still up in the 40s. There's pictures of it before it fell down and they demolished it. But that's just another piece of history that was gone and that can't come back. So it's unfortunate. So now the Native Americans attack the garrison houses. The English send riders out. They have to go to Taunton and to Boston, and some went to Plymouth. The guys the guy that made it to the governor in Boston, the governor says, okay, we need to get our militia guys together. Nobody's ready for war. The Native Americans aren't ready for war. The English aren't ready for war. Fortunately for the English, they have a jail full of pirates. The guy's name was Mosley. He was a pirate hunter. And they need guys that know how to fight. They need people that are going to be willing to die. And that's what these guys were. They were going to get hung anyway. So he goes into the jail and he says, you got two choices, boys. He says, you can come follow me and fight the Native Americans, fight the Wampanoags, or you can swing on the gallows. So they all get up and they all head to Swansea. And they relieved the siege of the garrison houses. Plymouth sent more guys. Metacomp comes back, and he ends up in Bristol. I can't think of the name of the place. What was it called? It was the center of the Pokanoket Nation. Solongs. It's this one. Solongs. And this is and you can pass this around. But this is Mount Hope Bay. This is where the capital of the Pokanoket or the Wampanoag Nation was. And you can pass that around. All right. Also where the Niles Garrison and the Bourne Garrison was. So now, all the troops together, they're going to attack Solms. They're going to attack the capital. And it takes them forever to get their act together. Who's going to be in charge? We've got guys from Taunton, you've got guys from Boston, you've got guys from Plymouth, Duxbury, everybody. Who's going to be in charge? They don't know. They have to wait. Benjamin Church shows up and says, you're wasting time. You have to attack now. And, am I saying anything wrong?
No, he was a bad man.
Well, which one?
Church.
Yeah, he was. But actually, he wasn't as bad as some. He wasn't as bad as Mosley. Mosley was just barbaric.
He was ruthless.
You know. So Church says you gotta go after these guys, and they were saying no, we're going to build a fort here. And he said, what do you need a fort for? The guys are right down the peninsula. So when they finally get their act together and they go, Phillip has left with all his people. The English can't believe that he's gone, especially with all the civilians, all the women and children and old elderly. They just got in canoes and went across the bay. So now they're going. He's trying to get back. He's trying to get into Nipmuc country. So they're coming up this side of the Taunton River, and they get into Fall River supposedly, right where the what you call it is now. I used to call it, when I was on the fire department, it was Mechanics Mill. Now it's Jerry Remy's, where Jerry Remy's is. They meet a patrol coming down that from the opposite side, from Boston, and there's a skirmish. The Native Americans fall back. The English are taking casualties. Everybody's taking casualties till they get to the swamp in Tiverton, and the Native Americans and Metacom go into the swamp, and the English do not want to go into the swamp. They're afraid. And again, if they had gone in, the war might have ended right there, but they had sustained casualties, and it was getting dark, and they were scared as hell. So they left them there, and through the Maori Trail, which goes up through the reservation and back over here, King Phillip escaped. The Native Americans go on to burn Rehoboth, Dartmouth, Bridgewater. They attacked Taunton, they attacked Plymouth. These guys were very good warriors. They were very good soldiers. They knew what was going on, how to act. It was a typical, they wrote the book on guerrilla warfare, let's put it that way. You attack a town and you give someone, then you wait. You wait for the relief column to show up. And as the relief column shows up, you attack that. So, but they killed women and children as well. And they killed, boom. That's what happens when you hire non-union contractors. So anyway, these guys are supposed to be great. Anyway, so the war keeps dragging on. The war only lasted a year. So, and what's amazing is that you have a culture that has been around for thousands of years, and you look at the maps that I give you, you look at the tribal maps and the areas that, and in 1 year, from 1675 to 1676, it's gone. It's all gone. And it's a shame. And it was all English greed that forced these people into a rebellion that probably Phillip knew he couldn't win. And the reason why they did so well at the beginning of the war, but as time went on, they could not replace their losses as the English could. The English were drawing people from Connecticut, the Massachusetts people. They were drawing people from Connecticut, Rhode Island. The English army did not come here. These were all strictly settlers that were called up into service and to fight and to protect their homes. They were given and they were promised land after the war. And this is what kept these guys under arms, was that, yeah, okay, once the Native Americans, the rebellion is subdued, I'm going to get a big chunk of their land. And that's what kept it going. So eventually, these people were seasonal. They lived seasonally. They came in this area where in the summertime, plant their crops, fish, dig out clams from the Taunton River, and in the wintertime, they took everything and went back to Wachusett Mountain, that area. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we stayed here.
All right. So this is their cycle. They did this for thousands of years. But they depended on planting, the next season's crop is dependent upon this season's crop, because you have to take it for seed corn. You have to take a portion of it for next year to plant more corn. Unfortunately, when you're not able to plant corn, and that's what these people lived on, basically this right here, it's called, today we call it Indian corn, but this is what corn's supposed to look like. Not the hybrid stuff, that yellow stuff that we eat. And William Bradford, in his letters from Plymouth, describes the corn and how it's multicolored. So we do know that this is what the stuff was actually, this is what corn actually is supposed to look like. Another thing that that made the Native Americans, and especially Phillip and some of the older chiefs, was that they were losing their identity. The Native Americans were starting to wear cloth clothes instead of furs and hides. So that was part of their culture. Everything was like being eroded by this. Instead of planting crops and things like that, then they became day laborers for the English. They'd go out and hunt for the English because the English couldn't shoot for crap. So they would hire Native Americans to go out and bring in deer or whatever, and then by the time they got the domesticated cows and steers over here, they didn't need them anymore. They didn't need them to procure food for them because they had chickens and pigs and whatever. So that made their value even less. So now the war's going on. This is what the Native Americans, this is a state-of-the-art flintlock, all right? The English, some of the English are still using a matchlock, all right? This thing is probably the most inaccurate, whatever you want. This is the match. All right, it's linen rope or linen twine that's been wrapped in urine, that's been soaked in urine. Right. Soak it in urine because it smolders, it won't burn, it retards the burning process. There's potassium in it. Urine was used in the manufacture of gunpowder as well back then, and also washing clothes as bleach. So there's a lot of things urine is used for. But when you light this thing, it smells like a cat box that needs to be empty. It really stinks. So to load this thing, now you got to understand this. This is what happens when, and believe me, this is supposed to be better than Native Americans' bows and arrows, but I can't see the point of this. Not at all. Picture this. This is your priming powder. This is lit and it's smoldering. So what you would do is you would light it at both ends actually. You take some priming powder, you put it in your pan, and you close the pan. You take one of these, it has a predetermined, these are powder bottles, has a predetermined charge set in it, like 80 grains of black powder. You dump it in, all right? You have a bullet bag here, right here. But this is a 69, this thing is actually about an 80 caliber. This is a 69 caliber bullet. So what you would do is they would take a bullet once they got the powder in, drop it in. A lot of the soldiers, what they would do is they would take 3 or 4 bullets and put them in their mouth. So instead of trying to fumble around for a bullet in a bag here, you just spit it down a barrel. And that's the original spitball. Now, you gotta ram everything down. And that wouldn't do that if there was a bullet in there. And put it back, because if you lose this, I'm sure these guys are a lot better than I am now. So now you're ready to fire. You blow on this to get it hot. You open up your pan, you present, and then the glowing ember touches off the powder in the pan, burns through a hole in the barrel, and that sends the charge, sends the bullet down range towards the your enemy or any kind of game that you're shooting at. Very difficult to fire these things at night because you're glowing. You know, it's very difficult to sneak up on anybody. They stink. So what you have here is like, this is supposed to be your offensive weapon, but you notice the stocks on all these muskets. They're all designed for a club. So, and also a soldier would carry a sword. So what you would have, or a hatchet. So what you have is you have 1 offensive weapon and 2 defensive weapons. They are not prone to be very proficient in going off when you want them to go off. If it's raining out, it probably won't go off. Depending on how old and how dry the powder is, it won't go off. This here is a wheel lock. And I left the spanner wrench out in the truck. Wonderful. Again, you got this big thing. What you do is you put black powder in here, priming powder, you close it, bring this down, you load it the same way. And I don't have the wrench with me. I left it out in the truck. Damn it. But you wind this up like a clock. And when you pull the trigger, it sparks, and that's what sets off the charge. And these were all in use during the King Philip's War. This is a snap haunch. Now you're getting into the problem with this one is there is no half cock. It's either full cock or yeah. This thing's got a hair trigger too. I mean, I fired all of these, and once you just, that's it. But it's very unsafe because the other flintlocks have half cocks where you can have, you ever hear the term, don't go off half cock? That's where it comes from. Lock, stock, and barrel, flash in the pan. This is primarily the one that the English colonists used, and this is a Dutch weapon. It's loaded the same way, but it has a dog on it. That's what this little latch here is called. It's called a dog. This one does have a half cock. And the real one, it wouldn't have half cock. The dog would be the latch that opens it up, that holds it up. Okay, so you load it up, bring back the dog, drops off, and it fires. Again, this is called a paddle butt. Obviously, you can use it as a paddle in a canoe, you know. You got to get out of there real quick. Hatchets, axes, any kind of edged weapon could be used as, any kind of edged tool could be used as a weapon. These were required by law for the English to have, either a sword or a hatchet. You had to own a weapon. You had to own a musket. You had to own cleaning gear for that musket, and you had to own a bullet mold for that musket. The government will give you powder if you joined, and a couple of bars of lead in order to make bullets.
any of those use a patch, Dave, or no?
No, it was just speed. It was quantity over quality. If it was patched, it would be a lot more accurate. But a patch is a little piece of cloth that takes up the space between the bullet and the diameter of the barrel, the interior of the barrel. When the bullet's coming out without a patch, it's banging on either side of the barrel, and then it'll go out. And they're probably accurate for about 40 yards. After that, you don't know where they're going. Gravity takes over, the wind, and then the charge as the bullet starts to wane, it starts to drop. So the further you have to shoot a little higher in order for it to drop and hit your target. Native Americans bow, small woodland bow, very good and very quiet, especially in an ambush, which you want it, very stealthy, very accurate, because as the Native Americans were growing up, this is what they were taught. Native American boys were taught how to use these, and you became a man by using one of these and being in combat and providing for your family before the muskets came in on the scene. They use knives, they use tomahawks. This is a pipe axe. You can actually put tobacco in here and use it as a pipe. As the war goes on, and the Native Americans keep taking casualties and not being able to replace them, and not getting any foods, they stop their revolt starts to run out of steam. And then something really desperate happens is that Native Americans when they started to turn themselves in, church took some of them and said, okay, you guys, I want you guys to fight with me. I want you to show us how to fight. It took him twice to go before the governor of Massachusetts, who was the overall commander of this war, to convince him that we are losing this war unless we change our tactics. So he finally changed his tactics, and as the prisoners are coming in, he would take some of the Native American men and say, okay, you fight for us, we'll let you live, and so on. And we'll let your family live. Because as the Native Americans were being turning themselves in, the men were being executed, and the women and children were being sold into slavery. Either that, or they were shipped out to Deer Island to starve to death out there. So it was just a brutal, brutal time. And when you think after the war, the English thought that the Native Americans, because they did not come under English law, it was easier to kill them. And also, it was easier to kill them if they did come under English law, if they were English subjects, because now they're a traitor. And that was the method of dealing with traitors back then. That was their mindset. I mean, of course, it's wrong, but the 17th century mindset, especially in England and Europe, was death to traitors. That was it. When they finally got King Phillip, it was a Native American that killed him, alderman. And they cut off his arms and legs, they cut off his head, and they put his head in Plymouth on a pole for 20 years. But that was that's how they dealt with traitors back then. That's how the Europeans dealt with traitors. The English did it to one of their own, named Roger Treff, T-R-E-F. When the Narragansetts entered the war in December of, well, they didn't enter the war, the English made them enter the war. They were kind of neutral during all this at the beginning, from June to December. It was decided back then to attack the Narragansetts. The Narragansetts at that particular time were the most populous, most strongest tribe in that era, because they had limited contact with white men. They weren't prone to the diseases that the white men carried, so their population was pretty much intact. as compared to the Wampanoags and the other up and down the coastal Indians who came in contact with plague and smallpox that the Europeans carried. So when they came in, there was a man named Roger Treff. He came from the trading post at, Smith's Castle. Richard Smith and Roger Williams opened up a trading post it's like in Kingston, in that area. Wickford. Right, Wickford. It's still there. And now it's a museum. But the swamp, it's called the Great Swamp Fight. And that is, the swamp was located near the Kingston area. I don't think they've ever found it, the exact location of it. But they think they know where it is, but they're not really exactly sure. But the way the fort was laid out was in a European style, which is like a star configuration, so that you have enfilading fields of fire that you can't, it's very difficult to attack head on, because you don't have a wall. It's all points, and if you come in between the 2 points, the star points, you can get fired at from both sides, all the way around. It's like this, and it was a huge fort. And they think that this guy Roger Treff, who was living with the Narragansetts, helped them design this fort and helped them build it. And once they captured Roger Treff, they beheaded him. They hung him, beheaded him, and chopped him up too. Just the way they did it. That's 17th century English thinking. They send a point. It sends a message. Let's put it that way. So the Narragansetts, of course, most of the men weren't there. But church was there, and they had their jumping off point was Smith's Castle. They marched down there, they attacked the fort. They're having one hell of a time trying to get into the fort, and a Native American said, it's not finished on one side. And that's where they attacked, from the unfinished side. They entered the fort, they burned everything, they killed everybody in it. Or they tried to kill everybody in it. Some Narragansetts to get away. They burned all the corn that was there, and church tried to tell the leaders, we're going to need this corn. Don't do this. So, but they did. They didn't listen to them. And the next day, they took their wounded, and they marched back to Smith's Castle. Blizzard hit, killed most of the wounded. Most of the wounded froze to death. A lot of the Native Americans froze that winter as well, died of starvation because they had their corn cache, stolen and burned and destroyed. The war starts to move towards the western Massachusetts, Connecticut Valley, the Merrimack Valley. Deerfield, Brookfield are all under siege. But more and more, and even in Bridgewater, more and more Native Americans are coming over to the English side. And again, they think they're going to be more lenient because they surrendered, but the men are executed and the women are sold into slavery. They captured Phillip's wife and child in the Bridgewater areas. They sold his wife and child. They believe they may have ended up in Bermuda or something. They would send them to the sugarcane plantations down south, where they died because they just couldn't handle the heat. A lot of them died. They were saying a lot of them died of homesickness because all of a sudden you're in the Caribbean. You're coming from northern New England, living in the woods, and now you're living on a Caribbean island. This is like, and they worked them to death. But basically, that's what these guys did. So as the war comes in, keeps going on, the Mohawks come in from New York. They come in on the side of the English. Now, Medicop and Connecticut are fighting a two-front war. They killed 300 of Phillip's warriors in western Massachusetts. If the Mohawks had joined Phillip, the whole outcome would have been a lot different. The Mohawks were very warlike people. They were always in conflict with the Abenakis. Abenakis were in the Vermont area. They had Eastern Abenakis, Western Abenakis. The English declared war on them. They declared war on any Native American that was in the area, and eventually either captured or killed them all. The war ended in 1676, but continued on for a couple of more years in northern Vermont. But as the war ended, for the most part, the war ended when Phillip died. It just lost, and that was in August of 1676. Like I said, another Native American alderman killed him. They cut off his hand. Alderman kept his hand, kept it in a bottle of rum, because he had this. Phillip had a disfigured hand from an accidental discharge, a musket malfunction. So he would go to taverns and everything, show the hand, and he'd get a free drink, something like that. That's went on for years. But the aftermath, there's all those lands that you see there, all the tribes that you see there. In 1 year, these people were here for thousands of years, and in 1 year they're gone. And some of them were set up on reservations. Church did set up a reservation for some of the Wampanoags in Indiantown Road. I don't know if you know where that is. There's a Native American cemetery up there as well. And so it turned, if it wasn't for the Native Americans turning kind of like against themselves, of the Mohawks that come in on the side of the English, of the Native Americans, and became allies with them instead of antagonists, this whole history would have changed. And they were just about ready to do that. They were like, it was like the Confederacy. They were that close to winning. Then all of a sudden, it just flipped. So basically, that's it. I just run out of words. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
When you said Anawan got killed, you meant one son, right?
One.
Yeah.
Anawan was killed in Plymouth. He was captured after Phillip died at Solom's. You have to remember, these people moved around with women and children. These people were amazing. They carried their elderly with them, they carried the women and children with them, plus the warriors. You had to feed these people, you had to protect these people. And then when the English did eventually find them, they would kill them. These people are crying for mercy, and there was no mercy. And one of the main tribes that went alongside with the English were the Sakonets, and from Little Compton. And they acted as guides. And when Weedamo got killed crossing over the Taunton River, she drowned. They were chasing one of her bands. She was a Pokanoket, if I'm not mistaken, right? Pecasset. I'm sorry, Pecasset. It's just, even by that standards, that thinking that this was just a tragedy, and that's the only way you can describe it. And we've forgotten about it, and it shouldn't forget about it, because it's part of our history. It's like slavery. It's like they want to forget about it. They want to rewrite it, and it's not right. I'm not saying slavery was right, but it's just not. It's part of our history and should be preserved so that we don't make the same mistakes. We keep making the same mistakes as we go along. We enter these wars that we can't win, or we don't try to win. I was in Vietnam, a combat veteran of Vietnam. My son was in Iraq, and I'm leading up to this, I'm saying, Jesus Christ, haven't they learned anything? It's the same bullshit. Excuse me.
Earlier, it's greed.
It's greed.
Yeah. All it is.
It's all it is. And then we go into Afghanistan, and it's like, come on, guys, give me a reason to go to war. Not this weapons of mass destruction. Never found them. And to continue it for like 17 years, we're still over there. It doesn't make any sense.
Never learn.
Please?
People never learn.
Well, we keep voting the same people in. It's the American public that is asleep at the wheel. We look around here, and you look at Fall River, and the way Fall River has gone in the past. We keep electing people with no vision. We keep electing people that are going to keep the status quo the same. There's no forward movement. And and we think like, oh, this is 100, 400 years ago. We're still influenced by this. We still have streets named after Native. We have Quikasham Street, Anawan Street, Picasso Street. We have King Phillip Street. We have Mount Hope, Montauk. They're all Wamsutta Street, Massasoit Street. They're all part of our culture that should be embraced, that should be taught in the schools, the local schools. But it's not. Jim, you?
Yeah, going back, in my readings, Boston or Bay Colony had a higher standard of living than London, when the war broke out. And it took 100 years for the economy to recover to the same level.
Plymouth,
following
after the war, the King of England, because Plymouth was destitute, they became part of the Bay Colony. There was no more Plymouth Colony. And when we think of Plymouth Colony, the kids think of Plymouth Plantation. Swansea was founded in 1669. That was part of the Plymouth Colony. Taunton was part of the Plymouth Colony. Rehoboth was part. Dartmouth. All the way up, I believe, until Braintree or Quincy, and then it became the Bay Colony. You know, there's so much history in this area that we tend to forget, and it's like, this is my little effort to keep it going. You know, I never expected this many people. I'm really happy to see everybody here. I expected 5 people. I'll tell you the truth. You know, it makes me feel good to see that people are still interested in history. You know, I'm not a video game. You know, I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm kind of old school. I got stuff. You know. Yes.
Who was captured in the Rehoboth Dighton area in a cave over there? It's actually Crypt. And he was drawn and quartered and that type of thing there, and I don't know if it was in Taunton or Plymouth. And that Crypt happens to be behind my house, and I've been told this story by historians for years.
I'm not familiar
It would
with
have been
that.
one of them, because he was executed, drawn and quartered.
Triff?
Who would be your best guess?
That's not Anawan Rock, is it?
No, this is Dighton Rehoboth. If you go down Route 44, you see the sign for it.
Yeah.
It says in a cave near here. Well, that's right behind my house, and since that's a little cave. There was a crypt, and these crypts were sweat houses. These crypts ran from where the Phoenicians are in New Hampshire all the way over Richmond Hill into Dighton Rock. I've walked all those many times, and one of these happens to be behind my house. I've been told this story by historian after historian. I was just trying to find somebody who could officially take a good guess for me who it was, because Dighton historical writers tried to get me to speak on it one of these days.
I'm not sure.
You know, any guess? It was supposedly one of them, his brother or he, that was killed. The other one was shot in a cedar tree, supposedly, down their home at the end of one after he burned all the houses and killed all the people.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I cannot find the answer to that question, but it's an historical thing, and I get many different stories from it.
There should be
I
some.
wish there was better. I've dug through every historic group I could find.
Have you read the Swansea, the history, the unofficial history of Swansea?
I have. I'll go back to it again.
There's a great, I can't remember, I don't know if it was Drake, somebody wrote it.
It was one of the brothers, one or the other.
Yeah, and they write a great history of Swansea in the King Philip's War. And it was who's who, and this is a fantastic book if you want to proceed, you know, with your, it's who, what, where, and when. And if you read this first, the history or the investigating of the King Philip War makes a hell of a lot more sense when you
It
know.
couldn't have been a brother. Alexander was poisoned,
Okay.
Philip was murdered, and the other brother was murdered.
Well, they consider this a
And there was
murder
a
in
daughter.
the Taunton Green area, drawn, quartered, and
A
some of
Compton is his name, a Compton.
Okay.
He was not drawn and quartered.
Okay, I gotta go back to
The-
history.
The younger brother was killed here in Tiverton.
Okay.
Yes.
Fighting a rear guard action against the
I'll
the
get a
English.
sign one of these
And there
days
was
from Rehoboth, and I'll
Alexander,
dig
and
into
then
it
there was
more.
Amy.
I just haven't had time.
Please?
There was Alexander,
Right.
Philip, the
And
younger brother,
who came in
a
the nest.
Compton,
Okay.
AKKOMPIN, and then there was Amy.
That was the only
I'm a
daughter.
descendant of Amy.
Okay.
So is,
Do you know offhand what the English or the European name of the third brother would be? Because
I don't think he
I
had.
don't think he had
I don't think he had one.
He didn't have one. They do have his name signed on a document, a deed.
Right.
It was actually signed.
It was. I think yes. I read that in the book, that he did sign he made a mark.
Anawan was actually the brother-in-law of Massasoit. He was married to Massasoit's sister. He was the war captain.
Right. He was 85 years old too
Yeah.
when he.
He surrendered.
Yeah, when he surrendered at Anawan Rock, and that church told him, yeah, you will be.
They took him to prison.
Took him to prison, and they executed him in
They
Plymouth.
executed him, yeah.
Yeah. And he handed over all the wampum belts.
Yes, he did.
For that's another thing.
Solidarity,
The-
peace,
the
a showing
whole-
of peace.
The whole thing of the wampum belts, if I'm not mistaken, the history of the tribe was written in the wampum belts, and they were huge. That they draped there were several.
They ended up.
Many
They
pounds.
ended up in a museum.
They ended up. No, I don't think anybody. They were supposed to be given to the governor of Massachusetts, who was then supposed to send them to the King of England as a gift. I don't think they made it to England. So they were never. They were supposed to be put on display at the Tower of London or something like that, and they never made it.
One of the belts they said was in one of the museums along with King Philip's War Club.
Well, they said they found King Philip's War Club in Orchard, the museum up on. I can't think of the name of the museum now, but somebody found it at a yard sale,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the way the
It
story
was
goes.
authenticated.
Yeah, the Fruitlands Museum.
Yeah, and I guess they picked it up for $20.
Yeah, and then somebody who bought it knew what it was and turned it into the museum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, this is a praying Indian. This is a Native Kampongapog praying Indian descended from those that were captured and put on Deer Island. This is strong
Of
there.
the Massachusetts.
Massachusetts Nation.
Massachusetts Nation.
Yeah,
So you had brought up Deer Island. So.
Yeah,
those are my people.
those are your people.
Yeah.
There was not a very good time. Let's put it that way. But it's not something that shouldn't be spoken about either.
It should be so.
You know, it should be brought more to the forefront. It's, for better or worse, it's our history. You know, and
And
that's,
if we're not teaching it here, it's never gonna be taught.
it's never going to be taught. You're not going, you know.
It's like,
And the demographics of Fall River change. We have a lot of Latin American kids. I teach in the Fall River school system. I teach Fall River history in an after-school program from 3 to 5 at the Green and Doran schools. And we have a lot of Latin American kids now. And this is not their history. You know, so you got to try to make it part of their, you know, this is where you live. So you try to give them a sense of roots because these kids are coming from Mexico and Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans are Americans, but Venezuela, Ecuador, and they're migrating up here. So, you know, they're migrating everywhere, let's put it that way. But it's something like to make them inclusive into this community as
The parallels in both cultures' history, you can point that right out to these kids.
Yeah.
So now it is my people, it's just my people up north.
Yeah,
Now you just tie it all together, guess what, they're paying attention.
yeah. You know, anybody?
Same thing, just different part of the plan.
Yep.
On some level, they are still teaching it. My boy's 14, and this morning when I told him we were going to come here, he actually told me the story of one son drowning in the Taunton. So he knew it. They are teaching it on some level.
What grade, what school do you go to?
Diamond now is charter school, that Atlantis charter, that,
They don't teach in Fall River public schools.
yeah.
We teach it in
He
Pontiac.
schooled me.
Yeah,
I teach 7th grade.
you're from Lakeville. Pontiac in Lakeville.
Pontiac.
Yeah.
Foster Gloucester.
Oh, Foster, Gloucester. There's a Pontiac in Lakeville as well.
Oh, really?
Yes, that was the Native
Even
American
that,
tribe
trying to
there.
look up some
The
of
Pontiacs.
there.
That's where
Nipmuc.
that's where was John Sassaman drowned in the Pontiac Lake, Lakeville.
I taught it to the special education children at the ACES program down at the Boys and Girls Club, when it
Yeah.
used to be over there, the elementary, and they were very attentive.
Oh, yeah.
They were very
The
interested.
kids really, you know, get into it, but it's like, it's not taught in the general,
No.
it's taught in the periphery of, some kids know it, some kids don't, you know. It's not, everybody should know it, you know.
Well, even talking about Columbus, I know a lot of the kids didn't have any idea when I mentioned, you know, how do you view Columbus before we even started talking about it, hero or a villain?
Yeah,
And most of my students were like,
A
It was
villain?
done. They're like, what do you mean a villain? I'm like, well, this is just a journal entry. You're gonna start thinking, and
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Yeah.
And we'll see how your perspective may or may not change. But I talked with another teacher, and she said in the elementary school that her son goes to, I think in Lincoln, they just don't even talk about Columbus anymore.
No.
So I'm like, well, there needs to be a balance.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just now just.
Well, that's the whole thing. If there's, right now there's, they just took down the Halloween decorations at the Green School. I mean, now there's no more Halloween. There's gonna be no more Christmas.
Because everybody gets offended.
Everybody gets offended.
Oh, please.
Yeah, but that's the new world order, you know? Everybody gets offended.
You're a Boston.
And if you
I live in Providence,
if you have
so yeah,
no, this is really getting serious because right now there's a reenactment going on in Cedar Creek in Virginia, Shenandoah Valley. It's the 150 something anniversary of the Battle of Cedar Creek. They found a pipe bomb there in the camp, at Sutlers camp. Sutlers are the people who sell to the reenactors. They found a real pipe bomb because they were going to blow up the Confederates. That's just not right. So what they did was they cleared all the camps. They went through the camps looking for more. So I had 2 reports. One they found another one, when they didn't. They had the battle, they had the reenactment today, but only for the reenactors, no spectators. The spectators were all, they sent everybody home. They couldn't go into the plot.
And then that ruins it because they're reenacting a part of history that we should know about.
Right, but
It's important to see.
some people feel that we shouldn't know about it. So they're going to use violence and force. And if you're if you oppose them, then you know you're a bigot, a racist, you know, a gun-toting, beer-drinking boob. You know, you know what I mean.
I know, and I'm a savage.
Yeah. You know, so that's
Right. It's getting ridiculous.
it is. There's got to be some common ground somewhere.
Yeah.
How long before they march on Gettysburg?
Oh, they will.
They will.
They will.
All those beautiful monuments there.
They'll march on anything now, you know, and get away with it. That's
Whether you agree with the Civil War and what it was about and the whole thing, it's a part of history.
Exactly.
It can't be wiped out because history is there to teach us.
Correct.
It's to
It's
teach
our
us.
history.
yeah.
It's to change, you know, if we learned anything from King Philip's War, it was the most bloodiest war in the United States history
Well,
per capita.
But it wasn't the United States. We went to the United States at the time.
Right, but in this.
In North America.
In this North America, it more than
Yeah,
the Civil War.
right, exactly.
So didn't we learn from anything? So if you look forward 400 years, 300 years, we're doing the
We're
same
still in the
thing.
same-
We're still doing the same
Same
thing is
thing.
still going on.
To other people.
To
other
other
people,
people.
right.
Nothing has ever changed.
No.
So why you want to wipe out that history? Because that's a reminder to us to always be civil and kind to one another.
Yeah. It's true. This is what happens when you don't be civil and kind to one another.
And to honor our history, we're going to be open on Veterans Day weekend.
Right.
And would you tell them a little bit about what we've got going on?
On the 11th and 12th, we have one of our board members, John Mayo. His dad was with the 26th Infantry Division, which was the National Guard of Massachusetts. He fought, the Yankee Division. He fought in France, and he was there from 1917 to 1919. But he kept a diary with pictures and artwork that he drew with colored pencils that he got from his mom and dad. And his son, John, who was 80, he's in 81, something like that. He had these blown up, and there's like 80 drawings. So we're going to present that on the 11th and 12th, along with, I have an American Doughboys kit, right, and some German things. And we'll talk about World War I. And we'll have John's artwork displayed.
And in addition, we're going to honor all veterans.
Right.
We have a little theme called Those Who Served. So if there's anyone here who has served in any branch of the service, We would love to interview you, maybe get a picture and a little write-up just about your experience. And we're going to have some, hopefully, from Vietnam and World War II and John's World War I and those who've
Yeah.
been in Iraq. So we'd like to have
And
a
you can
variety.
go on Lafayette-Durfee, John, Chris fixed the link. There's a form to fill out. On Lafayette-Durfee House website, it says, there's a link that you can fill out and send the form in with your picture and electronically, you know, and
If you want to do it today, that's good too.
Oh yeah, that's good too.
And we have some cheese and crackers for you if you'd like a little refreshment. And before you go, we'd like you to sign our guest book, which
Right.
is in the other room. And so I think David deserves a big round of applause for
Thank you. Thanks, Benny.